Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. Today, we're going to be going through Beyond Protection, which is going to be focused on the benefits of Protective DNS for MSSPs. Just some quick housekeeping before we get started. We will provide the recording to today's webinar shortly after it's done. Feel free to use the question box in your viewer console to ask any questions throughout the webinar to add conversation to the entire presentation. And we'll also have useful information on the benefits of Protective DNS for MSSPs out in our resource tab. Today, we will be going through the MSSP part of the webinar with myself, which is Kyle Thompson. I'm a senior channel account exec over at Highest. Been at Highest for a little over 5 years. Started out as a sales engineer, then moved over to the account exec side. Myself and Adam both have a similar background. We started out as a MSSP in a SOC team and grew our role over to the sales side. And we also have Adam Lopez, who is our Director of Solutions Engineering for Highest, and we'll be also to go through some of the details of how we use Highest Protect and also Protective DNS solutions for MSSPs. Our agenda today will be going through the importance of Protective DNS as it's used for MSSPs, going through the explanation of how it functions, the overview, and how to leverage it specifically for use cases that an MSSP will be utilizing it for. We'll go through the business value of Protective DNS, so understanding what the value points are for your clients, how you can use it for an MSSP, and some of the benefits from a financial side as well too. Then we'll go through Highest Protect, which is our Protective DNS solution, our partner program details in our bundling offering, which we're offering to MSSPs for this year. Then we'll close it out with key takeaways and of course, any questions that are being asked throughout the webinar. So with that, I'll hand it over to Adam to do the first part of the webinar, which is going to go through the importance of Protective DNS for MSSPs.
Great. Thanks, Kyle. So what I thought we would do today is start out with, before jumping into Protective DNS and really going through some of the key value adds and benefits of what Protective DNS can provide, start with what is DNS, right? And most everybody knows what DNS is, but it's sometimes good to kind of refresh and understand how it works, what it's utilized for, and then we can build on top of that with what Protective DNS will offer. So, as most of you are probably well aware, DNS stands for the Domain Name System, which essentially translates domain names like google.com or highest.com into IP addresses that computers can then read and communicate with. So fundamentally how DNS works is kind of twofold, right? It's both user-driven and machine-driven. So applications can generate DNS requests, but most of the time when you hear about DNS, you think about web browsing or user-driven DNS traffic. So for example, myself or Kyle could enter in highest.com into our browser. Our browser would then send a request or a query to a DNS server, and it kind of would run through that specific process of trying to understand what IP address is associated with that domain. So, of course, there's different elements and hierarchy of DNS, but from a high level and just kind of as a refresher, really you have kind of your root servers, which is, the different servers that are going to be managing or directing towards your TLD servers or top level domains. So think of .coms, .orgs, .edus, the different TLDs of the world. And then what the TLD will do is direct, or that server that hosts those TLDs will direct it to the authoritative server to then provide the answer. So authoritative meaning it knows the answer, or it knows what IP address is associated with that IP. So now this is done obviously very, very quickly. And of course, there's other things that are involved in terms of caching, right? TTLs or time to live parameters around the different types of DNS queries. But in general, right, DNS is really fundamental to the way the internet works. Most traffic, right? A lot of traffic, the majority of traffic starts with a DNS query. Which then allows for that session to be created, as well as the connection between those client and server, and then communication through whichever protocol or service is deemed necessary for that user or for that application. So if we take a step towards what protective DNS is, and it's different than protection of the DNS protocol itself. So think of DNSSEC or actual mitigation and strategies around protecting the DNS as a protocol. Protective DNS is more of a security service that is using DNS to prevent different types of access or traffic towards domains that may be malicious or that may be associated with different types of threats. So you can think of phishing, malware, C2, those types of things. Now, how protective DNS would work at a high level, again, same thing in terms of DNS query. A user or an application would attempt to access a website or request a DNS record, right? That protective DNS server or solution that you're utilizing would then analyze and provide kind of identification of good, bad, or indifferent traffic. So in essence, that server that you're asking to provide the answer to a DNS query would say, okay, hey, you're asking for the IP address of baddomain.com. Hey, based on my analysis, this is a bad domain. Therefore, we will not provide you with the IP address. We will provide you with maybe an IP of a block page or a sinkhole or something of that nature. So again, high level, protective DNS is really utilizing threat intelligence or some type of analysis to be able to identify malicious domains and therefore prevent or take action proactively in preventing users and traffic to domains that may be or are malicious. Of course, there's other aspects of protective DNS, but at a high level, that is the essence of what we're trying to accomplish. Now, before we continue, there's a couple other things to keep in mind around ways to implement protective DNS, and really the legacy kind of methodology or kind of strategy around protective DNS is known bad. So think of all of your different blacklisted domains or IPs and your lists of known bads and curating a number of different threat intelligence sources. And that's great. And that's a good source of intelligence and of security. But when you only rely on that type of intelligence and analysis, you often miss the unknowns, right? Or the what ifs or the suspicious type of domains just based off the way that traffic is being analyzed. We'll get into that a little bit later in terms of highest protect. So let's move on to leveraging protective DNS for MSSPs. So as Kyle mentioned, both myself and Kyle were SOC analysts in an MSSP. We definitely sometimes saw DNS logs, but we never really saw protective DNS logs in terms of when we were in a SOC. However, based off of what we now know and working with HIAS, they could have definitely come in handy, not only from kind of a enhanced threat detection perspective or being able to have real-time blocking outside of your firewall or other type of security controls, but it also could have helped, and it does help when in terms of robust security monitoring to have different types of log sources to be able to have a full picture of an incident or an investigation, but also in quickly identifying and mitigating threats through protective DNS in the form of incident response. So for example, seeing that a DNS query was blocked, validating that across your firewall logs to see that, yep, we didn't see any traffic from that domain or IP address because we know it was blocked through DNS, now helps you to validate and confirm different types of security incidents or alerts and be able to respond appropriately. It can also, from a MSSP perspective, help in client education and reporting in terms of the types of traffic you're seeing. Of course, sometimes you can get this from like web filters and other types of security controls. But again, because DNS is so fundamental to the way the internet works, is oftentimes some of those other solutions won't give you that full picture just based off the types of policies or configurations you have enabled. And with protective DNS, you're able to provide that level of reporting based off individual users or different types of threats that might be apparent within the environment. And then lastly here, in terms of kind of leveraging Protective DNS for MSSPs is really the cost effectiveness. So in the security industry today, there's a number of different kind of bells and whistles, if you will, of new, latest and greatest technology and the next best thing in terms of security solutions and platforms, where oftentimes DNS is overlooked because it's been around forever. It just works. And if you don't know where to look, you often won't find the nuggets. And so that's what Protective DNS can often provide, is a scalable solution to really increase your security, not only from a client-facing perspective of the services you're offering, but also from a SOC efficiency and effectiveness perspective of your own internal SOC analyst and team that's managing and monitoring your clients. And it's because it's fully SaaS-based. There's not really a need for extensive hardware investments or costs associated with the solution. So again, those are some of the kind of the value adds of leveraging Protective DNS for MSSPs. So now that we've talked a little bit about DNS in general, kind of layering on Protective DNS, and then also how MSSPs can leverage Protective DNS, where are really the value adds from a business perspective? So a couple things that I want to touch on from a key feature perspective is threat intelligence integration, right? So I mentioned earlier around the strategy of a legacy Protective DNS solutions utilizing lists, known bads, threat intelligence feeds. And while those are all great, and definitely you want to have some level of that in any of your Protective DNS solutions, you really should start shifting the mindset of looking for solutions that are using real-time dynamic analysis, because the DNS in general is dynamic, right? You have domain registration details that often change. Domains will change hands between owners, especially malicious domains that are being bought and sold, parked, stood up, taken down. You have infrastructure dynamics. You have record IP addresses, or IP addresses where the domains are pointed to, that might change. You have all the different aspects of DNS records themselves that are dynamic. So when you think about threat intelligence integration and using up-to-date intelligence around domains, HIAS really focuses on the infrastructure of what those domains are tied to, which kind of leads me to the next bullet point there around blocking malicious domains. So if you have access to information that can tell you that this domain used to point to in passive DNS, for example, an IP address that was associated with command and control servers or C2 servers, or even phishing or malware, and then you can use additional telemetry to understand if that domain is tied to similar infrastructure, you now have the ability to prevent or be proactive if that domain has never been seen before. So for example, it's not on a list, or it just got stood up a while ago, or it hasn't been used yet, but was being aged for 6 months to 8 months, but still hasn't been used, and it's not on VirusTotal, for example. So being able to, again, have a different way of looking at the analysis of domains through intelligence-based solutions allows you to then block certain types of malicious traffic, such as phishing, malware, and C2, like you see there in the second bullet point. Now, as a former SOC analyst, I'm very picky and very adamant about the types of logs that you can view in different types of solutions. So one of the key features of Protective DNS solution is being able to have the visibility into those log queries so that you can use them for analysis, either by themselves or cross-correlation by exposing those or exporting them to your SIEM solution. And then again, building correlation rules off of that traffic against other sets of logs or other sources, authentication logs, firewall logs, web filtering logs, whatever it may be. And so it just gives you, again, that ability to be more proactive and have more visibility into, again, the fundamental aspect of the internet, which is often overlooked. Now, when you look at user awareness, so this can be utilize in a couple of different ways. One is because of the proactive nature of Protective DNS and being able to basically redirect users to a block page or to a warning page, can help with user awareness, right? If somebody clicks on maybe a phishing domain and the Protective DNS solution identifies that through the DNS query that's generated after clicking on that link, maybe it pops up a page and now there's some more user awareness. But you can also use the metrics and the kind of monthly trends and behaviors over time to help with user awareness, which may or may not be currently a part of your MSSP offering, but could definitely help in terms of monthly reporting and other types of services that are offered to your end clients. So set some of the things that we can leverage when it comes to Protective DNS. And I mentioned a few of these on the previous slide, and I'll just kind of reiterate them because, again, I want to make it clear and make sure that point comes across that, Protective DNS is often overlooked. It's often not logged. And there's often a lot of information in terms of threats or correlation or relationships and patterns in DNS traffic that you can really use to kind of meet and map to these bullet points, right? Enhance security. So before those threats reach your network in terms of a session created, now firewall, traffic's traversing the firewall with some source, whatever, or with some service, whether it's HTTPS, HTTP, whatever it might be, or even another service. You can stop it before that even happens. Reducing your risk, again, understanding all of your outbound DNS queries from your MSSP clients can help you reduce the impact of different types of threats. And as I mentioned, with the different types of logging, correlation, and being able to ingest those logs into other solutions such as SIM or SOAR platforms, it gives you that added kind of insights into not only attempted access, but what was the result? Was it a query that was successful, right? Was there a response, or was it an NX domain lookup, such as the site doesn't exist or wasn't able to return a response? And then there may be, depending on the type of industry or the verticals that your MSSP targets and manages in terms of clients, may help to meet regulatory compliance requirements. I know there's a few requirements where Protective DNS might be able to map to specific NIST controls or framework, HIPAA, high trust, things of that nature. So again, there's just some added things that you can provide based off of being able to offer a Protective DNS solution to your end clients. So how would we actually use this, or how would an MSSP use a Protective DNS offering to really accelerate the MSSP offering and services? What we found, just going out and talking to the market and being former analysts ourselves, is that a couple things is Protective DNS allows you to control specific aspects of your client's environments that oftentimes you're not able to. So a lot of MSSPs that we talk to, when you are looking to provide proactive solutions of being able to actually generate actions or generate types of responses, instead of just escalating and providing an investigation or an alert, through Protective DNS, you can actually say, hey, Mr. Client, we saw this traffic on the network. We were able to mitigate it, stop it, prevent a user from actually generating traffic to a specific domain, and have the investigation and the alert action or the response action all in one. So being able to kind of differentiate and use that as a competitive advantage of not just, detection and response, but actual, an action, a remediation, right? Now, in terms of market leadership, right, you can now position yourself kind of as a full shop from, hey, we are providing a cost-effective, scalable solution like you see in the second bullet point, but also being able to differentiate by, again, controlling the recursive DNS, right, which is what Protective DNS is looking to accomplish, controlling that and really taking ownership for your clients from the DNS layer. So I wanted to just jump into a couple of case studies of how Protective DNS can be utilized from an MSSP perspective. So this is from one of our MSSP clients that has a US-based retail client that was experiencing a security incident related to a remote access Trojan, or a rat, as most of you are probably aware of. So essentially what happened was there was evidence of, or when the IR initiated, there was evidence of legitimate remote access tools such as Slapshot being used by threat actors to conduct their attacks. So with a Protective DNS agent through our highest Protect agent, we were able to deploy very rapidly to the environment, identify Slapshot requests and queries, and then actually be able to block communication to that related infrastructure. So one of the things too is, based on the scope of where this threat was emanating from and where the initial investigation took our MSSP client, they actually identified that access to specific hosts or hosts that were trying to utilize and generate traffic to Splashtop were actually out of scope previously. So I know it might be hard to see in the picture, but this is one of those scenarios where, you know, Slapshot is not inherently bad. As you can see, the FQDN there is actually enabled. It's actually green because it's not necessarily a malicious domain, but it can be used in malicious ways and in certain types of attacks. And that's where you see on the right-hand side or in the middle with the domain itself being blocked by our Protective DNS solution. So that's one quick example of how once we start seeing that traffic, we can really shape and tune it either to an active investigation or even just through automation and natively out of running the solution in your environments or your client's environments. One other case study here I wanted to talk through is a Middle East professional services client. The DFIR team was able to remove threat actor access and then deployed highest protect after removing access, right? So what this was basically is, we've cleaned up the environment. So this is another use case, right? This is an IR use case where, you know, I'm sure a lot of you as MSSPs offer IR services, and then you are a leave behind, right? So you go to a client engagement, you investigate, or you have some IR services that are utilized. And as a result of that engagement, the client then asks you to stay on as a managed service provider and continue monitoring and managing that environment. So this would be a use case where one of our partners was able to remove threat actor access and then deployed highest to be able to kind of see what was left behind. They quickly found out that the threat actor was conducting some additional kind of phishing operations and trying to regain access or be persistent. So as you can see, we were able to block this communication natively. This might have been based off of domain age, it looks like. So natively out of the box, domains that are 30 days or less would automatically be blocked. But as an MSSP managing the solution, you have the ability to tune and configure a number of different parameters around what types of threats and parameters exist around blocking different types of traffic. So one of the things I also want to talk through, especially just with former experience as being a SOC analyst and working in an MSSP, is how to mitigate strain on your security controls. So because we know that DNS is a fundamental building block, it is noisy. There's a lot of DNS traffic, but it really is that first choke point or that initial barricade. So if we, I mentioned this earlier, if we can get to a point where we are actually blocking malicious domains or reducing attacks from the DNS layer, it then helps to strengthen other defenses, right? You can put other defenses and other controls to better use instead of having them have to sift through all the noise of what is probably can be taken care of at the DNS layer. And then again, thwarting phishing and kind of halting malware, right? With a good set of intelligence, with a good, highly tuned protected DNS solution, you can block access to these types of threats even after they might have gained initial access. If you assume breach or you're on board with the cyber resiliency trends of today, having the ability to, okay, if something gets in and now we see it beaconing out, or now we see it trying to reach out to phone home, if we can block that at the DNS layer, then we've essentially deemed that threat useless. And then lastly, supplementing firewalls and other controls, right? So think about workload reduction. So if we can, again, block some of this malicious traffic before those connections were ever made that generate network traffic, then we can help reduce some of those workloads on some of the other controls and, again, put them to better use. So instead of your firewalls having to identify and analyze all that traffic, maybe they can, we can reduce some number of events that are, or types of traffic that are being generated and can be put to better use. So those are just some things that I think of when, I used to be in a SOC and sometimes didn't have, or most of the time didn't have access to, protected DNS logs or DNS in general. So I wanted to pass it over now that we've kind of talked over around, again, protected DNS at a high level, and how MSSPs can utilize protected DNS. I wanted to pass it back over to Kyle to kind of talk a little bit about Highest Protect and what that entails from our MSSP program side.
Thanks, Adam. So let's go over Highest Protect. So Highest Protect is a SaaS-based protective DNS solution. It was recognized by CISA and the NSA about 3 years ago when they released a joint white paper. They listed out the importance of protective DNS, some of the value that it has and use cases, along with some vendors of choice, which Highest is listed out as one of the solutions to encompass some of the use cases that they have mapped out. So Highest Protect on the back end, it utilizes a machine learning system in order to determine if a domain will be malicious or not. So it utilizes a multivariate analysis system in order to determine if a domain is going to be malicious, and it utilizes it in a very unique way. We don't just look at a feed of different types of indicators that we get or procure from multiple different sources. We actually look at a lot of the data from who registers a particular domain to where it's being utilized from a geolocation perspective, who's registering that particular domain, and if it also has any previous associations to malicious activity. So based off of our results, we've seen it pretty successful out in the market. We're starting to see a lot of MSSPs utilizing it as of today. It's built for MSSPs as it has multi-tenant abilities in place. It has a policy engine, which you can actually customize for each of your clients. So if you don't want any of your clients reaching out to certain TLDs, you have that control, or if you just need it for a specific client or two, you can actually map it out on a per client base. Outside of that, it all operates on the DNS level. It's relatively simple to deploy. All we need is just either an endpoint of choice, whether it's Sentinel-1 or MDE are the two that we have as of today as an integration point, which means it can just seamlessly integrate with existing tools without having to deploy any existing infrastructure. Or we do have our own agent. So if there is a deployment method where there's just nothing on those endpoints and we need to gain visibility on roaming devices, we can do that as well. And for quick and easy deployments, we can just stand up a open resolver where you would just point DNS traffic from a Windows DNS server, bind server directly to Highest Protect. And then from there, we'll be able to quickly analyze and create very simple baselines of DNS traffic across the entire infrastructure. And I know I quickly went over the deployment, but here's another visual of what it would look like. So Highest Protect is all up in the cloud. From there, we would have the multiple deployments, whether it's through endpoint agents, our own agent, or open resolvers. Everything is UI-based up front, which makes it relatively easy for a SOC analyst, for example, to go through, respond to alerts, sift through to traffic, and also look at the logs as a whole. or we have an API endpoint as well, which can integrate with a variety of different technologies such as SIM and SOAR solutions that most SOC analysts have. So coming from myself as a SOC analyst, a single pane of glass view is what we try to achieve. You don't want to have multiple tabs and windows open just because it becomes very difficult to navigate through each one. So we try to keep it as simple as possible by taking all of the most relevant data that we identify within Highest Protect and then start integrating out with a variety of different tools. And then our Highest On-Point Partner Program. So last year we launched our On-Point Partner Program, which it does support MSSPs along with resellers, VARs, distributions as well too. But really the MSSP partner program gives everything that an MSSP needs in order to be successful with Highest Protect from the technical side. So once again, it has multi-tenancy, API integration. It's relatively easy to stand up new clients, dismiss them as needed, and everything is centralized within a single pane of glass view. We have a ton of marketing and content support. So within our partner portal, you'll have access to white papers, battle cards, really any information that's needed in order to help educate the sales team and also drive sales within the organization to help your client base in order to achieve the results that you're looking for from a business perspective. We also offer our own marketing support as well too, so we can work in joint marketing collateral such as joint white papers if needed to be, in order to help further advertise out the Highest Protect within your support. And then we also have our own client support as well too. So with each MSSP partner program that gets added on, we will have our own dedicated CX team, which will be available for any sort of technical issues as well too. And some of the benefits from joining our partner program is you'll start seeing new revenue growth. So you'll be able to drive monetization of new services that normally you wouldn't already offer as of today. So not only can you get a resale from a product, but you can also gain additional revenue from adding services, since most of our clients will not be able to support having Highest Protect run without an MSSP. Now, who's going to be responding to the alerts? Who's actually going to be investigating and actually utilizing the multiple tool sets outside of just Highest Protect in order to identify threats and actually take it down to closure? So you can add the services costs, which will have a little bit more additional revenue as well too. And the deployment methods, relatively quick, once again, depending on if you're using an open resolver, integrating with agents or utilizing our own, you'll be able to deploy Highest Protect relatively easy as well too. And then integrating with a variety of different stacks that we have as of today, from Splunk to a variety of different SOAR technologies as well. And even having a REST API in the backend to do custom integrations, we can really integrate into any technology that's out there as of today. And last, being able to enhance protection that normally you wouldn't see from other tools. So there's a ton of different security tools that are out there in the environment today. And really, none of them are specialized in looking at DNS the way that we do. So adding us as another layer of your additional security stack will only provide additional protection for your clients. And for this year, any new MSSP that's going to be joining joining the Highest On-Point program with Highest Protect, we will be able to offer a free complimentary license of Highest Insight for 1 year. And all that is really required is for you to take on Highest Protect and then being able to offer it as a service offering within your organization. So with that, you'll be able to get a free license up to a year. And then you'll also be able to see the value of utilizing both tool sets within your environment. And with that, I will open it up for any sort of questions that we might have, which I don't think I see any in the audience. But to close off what we went over today, we went through DNS as a whole, which Adam did a really good job at explaining DNS, understanding what protective DNS is, how it benefits from an MSSP perspective, some of the use cases where we've seen other MSSP utilize Highest Protect, and of course, the advantages of Highest Insight and the Highest Protect bundle for this year if you decide to become a partner with us. And with that, I would like to thank everybody for their time today. And we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar.